Just invest in your education, and not formal education, but that's reading, it's thinking, it's talking to people, it's listening to your podcast. It's just all of that. Get hungry and just understand that when you leave school, it's just a license to start learning. When you leave university, it's a license to start learning, and it can be just listening to people, whatever. But yeah, and just believing that there's a flywheel in life. And of course, it takes a lot of effort to get the momentum going on the flywheel.
Welcome to the Profitable Farmer podcast, where we share stories and tips to help you run a better farming business and create your very own freedom farm. If you're looking to work smarter and not harder in your farm business, welcome. You're in the right place. G'day everyone, I hope this finds you incredibly well. In this podcast interview, absolutely delighted to interview Tim McGavin, the founder, chairman and managing director of Laguna Bay. Now, Laguna Bay is one of the largest privately owned ag investment funds on the planet. Started in 2010, it's one of the longest standing agri fund managers in Australia. Their research-driven, value-based investment strategy builds scalable and sustainable food and agri businesses across Australia. They've got a pretty interesting business model. They've got a number of offerings, but one of them really interests me, and we touch on it in this conversation about backing established and emerging farming families and providing private capital to them to support their growth, help them create a legacy and achieve a meaningful succession. With Tim, who is an incredible character, a very impressive leader, a very knowledgeable individual, and a very passionate contributor to the high performance conversation and the personal development conversation, especially as it relates to Australian agriculture and leaders within that space. He is a graduate of Marcus Oldham Ag College. He contributes to the Marcus Oldham Ag College Foundation, and he pioneered in a collaboration between Laguna Bay and Marcus Oldham Ag College Marcus Mines, which is all about helping Aussie farmers build resilience, pursue high performance, and pursue a personal development journey. It's available to all of us. And I hope that in this interview, we advocate for the incredible work that Marcus Oldham Ag College continue to do and the impact that they've had on so many leaders in Australian agriculture. And I hope also we give you an insight into Marcus Mines. I encourage you to have a look at it. It's free and available to everyone in our industry through marcusmines.com.au. I hope also that we do Tim's story and the Laguna Bay story justice. A compelling interview. I hope you enjoy it. And Tim, thank you so much for your openness and for sharing and for the insights that you share through your story. Tim, great to have you on Profitable Farmer with us. Gathan Kutri introduced me to you probably 2 years ago. What would your comment, Tim, be first on Gathan as a industry leader and agriculturalist?
Yeah, Gathan's an amazing mind. He's done a lot for the industry and for the stone fruit industry, particularly in terms of, just pioneering varieties and his approach to canopy management and, how he goes about things. So, really interesting.
Yeah, a wonderful guy, and a shout out, Gathan. Thank you so much for introducing me to Tim. And Tim, I've been looking forward to this conversation for a long time. So thank you very much for joining us and look forward to sharing your story.
Pleasure.
I understand that your roots in agriculture extend back to, is it Jubilee Park in Barcaldine? Is that right? As a young son of a farmer, would you mind sharing your early days in agriculture and your reflections growing up at Barcaldine?
Yeah, sure. So I was born in 1970 in the Barcaldine Hospital. Parents had Jubilee Park, which is about 50 kilometres southwest of Barcaldine, just 20,000 acres of sheep and cattle. And yeah, my mother and two sisters drew that block in 1951, which is the foundation of the Jubilee Foundation of Federation, so hence the name. So yeah, I was the youngest of three. The eldest is a sister, Sue, who's married to a cotton and cattle farmer at Theodore, and I have a brother, Rob, who's some of you might have heard of, Cobram Estate, and chairman of Marcus Oldham at the moment. So yeah, we're still very close. Both parents have passed away, but yeah.
Tim, I'm keen to explore how a young bloke from Barcaldine ends up heading up and founding one of the world's largest privately owned ag investment funds. It's an amazing story, and yeah, congratulations sincerely. I think you've had your fair share of hardship in those early years. I think you lost your mother at a young age and then your father. Would you mind speaking to growing up through that adversity and what that meant for your kind of early days in agriculture?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, mother died when I was 7, which was a bit of a blow. She had breast cancer and died very suddenly. And it left us, obviously, a pretty tight little knit family. It was a pretty basic upbringing out there. We weren't connected to the grid, so we just had 32-volt wind-generated power and kerosene fridges and a wood stove, donkey for the hot water, and outside dunny. No, yeah, killed our own meat and milk cows before school in the mornings, and yeah, it was pretty rudimentary upbringing. Dad was a old bushy, only had a few years of education, and yeah, so it was probably pretty tough, to be honest, especially on him. And yeah, it was interesting times, but very, very good upbringing. Really, just learnt some really good basics, sort of principles of life. Just honesty and integrity, and just hard work. So yeah, we used to often muster before school, before we caught the 7 o'clock school bus. And then Dad got cancer when I left school, and then he died. He lasted a fair while. He died at 59, I think, so relatively young. And when I was, I think, 29 or something. So yeah, very tough old bloke. But even that, with his cancer, he was given 18 months to live in 1989, and lasted another 12 years, just pure grit, really. And it was very inspirational to see someone that just refused to bow down and just kept working right until the end, really. So yeah, great man. And remarried Sandy Walker, who is now Sandy McGavin from the Walker Santa Gertrudis family at Barcaldine, who's been an absolute wonderful stepmother. Very fortunate. Yeah.
Tim, I hope you don't mind me asking, how do you remember your father, and how does growing up with a hardened bushman like that shape you and your siblings, do you think?
Definitely shaped us, makes you quite resilient. Dad was a disciplinarian, to say the least, and never broke his spirit. He always, he could lose his temper, and it was back in the days when, you used to get flogged with a green stick or a piece of wire if you did something wrong. So you learn to respect your older pretty quick. But at the end of the day, he would always, put his arm around you and tell you what you did right. And he would always tell you why he, lost his temper or or whatever. So yeah, it was fond memories. It obviously wasn't a cushy living. And then I was sent to boarding school and then left school in 1988 during the wool boom. And everyone was going to get rich because we had the floor price, and then clearly that was pulled, which had to happen from an economic standpoint. But very, very tough times during the 90s. We nearly went broke and saw a lot of people go broke. Just had to knuckle down and work hard and cut costs and try and get through it. So yeah, Dad was a 24/7 worker, as was and as is a lot of bushies. So yeah, it was inspirational, but I guess because it wasn't cushy, and it wasn't what I sort of aspired to do for the rest of my life and how I wanted to live. So that's probably why all three of us went off and just, made a different life for ourselves.
What were one or two of your first jobs out of school? And we'll get to uni in a minute, perhaps, at Marcus Oldham. But what were some of your first jobs out of school, Tim?
First job was actually working for John Dunnicliffe, who I don't know whether you've ever had the fortune to meet John. He's passed away now, but one of the great pioneers of agriculture. John had bought Isis Downs in the early 80s, and he'd sold that to CPC for big money during the wool boom. And so he'd bought, I think, the biggest single branded cattle deal ever, him and a fellow called Danny Webb Smith, and they'd leased a property in northern South Australia. So I went there for a few months and just gave them a hand to muster, and was very, very fortunate. John had studied economics. He's from New South Wales. He was an amazing thinker, and I remember him lecturing me over the campfire about how artificial prices don't work and how the wool market was going to collapse. They had to pull the floor price. It was a big Ponzi scheme, and how right he was. So, yeah, John then went up and into the Kimberleys and eventually ended up at Beetaloo, which is probably did one of the biggest and first very, very large-scale regenerative grazing, holistic, putting in, uniform distribution of water systems and rotational grazing and whatnot on a massive scale at Beetaloo. I think they put 600 watering points in over a period, and fascinating man. So very, very lucky to have him. And then I contract mustered a little bit. I went up to the Kimberleys and worked in a stock camp at Liveringga, which is now owned by Gina Hancock. And even that was a fascinating experience. I call it my national service. It was sort of all horseback, old school, camped out, a lot of Aboriginal stockmen in the stock camp. And yeah, we used to work pretty hard during the season, only have a few weekends off. But even that, as a young bloke, it was really interesting, that particular place. The Texans in the late 70s had spent nearly $100 million, 1970 money, damming the Fitzroy River and laser levelling about 80,000 acres and putting in irrigation channels and big lateral irrigators. And they built a small feedlot, a small abattoir, and a gazetted town called Cambalin, and the floods came and wiped them out. So that was only, wasn't that long before I was there, and by the time I got there, it was just all shut down. It was all just back to cattle. So yeah, I was actually flying around there a couple of weeks ago, just having a look, and it's really interesting. A lot of northern development at the moment, and hopefully we've learnt the lessons from those, and that's onwards and upwards up there.
How do you reflect on your time up in the top end? You've spent quite a bit of time up there in your early years, Tim. Was it a significant thing, and would you recommend it to young farmers coming out of school and uni?
Absolutely. I'd recommend it to everyone. I think, I think it's a big mistake for young people to go from school into university. I think a gap year is really, really crucial. Unless you are one of the very few people that know in your heart and soul exactly what you want to do, the chances are you're going to study something you'll never use. And I think we've got an education bubble which is stealing our children a bit at the moment. Very prevalent in the US, where there's such pressure to go to university and study something, and we're just teaching the kids to run up a HECS debt and study something that they may not use and only do a few contact hours a week. So it's not the best start. So I think just that year out and about, particularly important now we're so connected. And I think it's quite a soul destroying world in some ways for the young now. It's just the outside pressures and constant connectivity and just constant information. I think just having that time up there where you're offline, at least during the day, and you have to take responsibility, you have to make decisions, you have to solve problems. If you get bold, you get a flat tire in the middle of nowhere, you got to work it out. You can't just phone a friend. And yeah, I was on the phone this morning with a great friend from Sydney. He's straight out of Sydney and got a job up there, and he's on his third year, and Dad's wondering whether he'll ever get him back. He's just loving it up there, and that's pretty typical. I think that it's great, but that's a developing trend. I'd really, really encourage it.
Isn't it great to see some of those sort of large farms and stations up there running their programs so well around bringing young people, stockmen and women into their systems? It's just great to see that it is sort of becoming really quite professional in how they're making that happen for that next generation of kids coming through.
Yeah, it's brilliant. It's a very valuable service to Australia and agriculture, but not just agriculture, to the whole of Australia, just to have somewhere where you can take someone that may have zero skills straight out of the city and invest the time and do it in a safe environment, and just build so many different skills that you need to go and work on a station. You might be doing something something different every day. And yeah, so it's great. And like you fall into bed at night exhausted, you don't have time to be neurotic and worry about yourself or what everyone else is up to. It just, it does teach you to get on with life, I think.
I think that's one of the amazing things about Marcus Oldham Ag College is that it encourages exactly what you say, some time in the industry. And then what I understand, and I didn't go to Marcus, but I'd love to hear your reflections of that program and that institution and perhaps the impact it's had on you, Tim. I'd love for us to be really advocating for Marcus Oldham Ag College in this conversation. But I think it's very case study based and very pragmatic in how it does teach business and the technical skill sets needed to succeed in farming to its students. What's your read on your experience at Marcus Oldham and how it's sort of helped you and shaped your career?
It terrifies me to think if I wasn't lucky enough to have gone where I would be, to be frank. Definitely my world would be a very different place. And I struggled at school. We missed a hell of a lot of school when we were in Barcaldine State School. We just had a running note that the old man had us out working and no one asked any questions. We didn't have to do homework and whatever. So when I got to boarding school, I really, really struggled. And Dad thought education was a bit of a waste of time, so he never really encouraged it. So it wasn't really until, I was 24. Marcus attended one of our agricultural lessons at Churchy, and so we sort of learn about it. And then I was lucky, Rob, my brother, went the year before me, and so yeah, and lucky to be in a position where we'd both, worked and done enough to be able to pay for ourselves. It was never, Dad didn't fund it at all. And so Marcus is a very unique institution. It's a business, really. It's private. They don't receive any government money at all. And that makes it really unique because they don't have to curtail to all the provisions that come with government money and all the wokeism that gets jammed down people and the unionisation of the lecturers and all that nonsense, so they can run it like a business. And, the lecturers are ranked all the time by the students and, put on a performance plan if they're not good enough and then turned over. So it's just brilliant in that regard. It's brilliant in the regard where they get you in very, very, they work you like a business. Like, it's 5 days a week. It'll be probably 4 or 5 times the average contact hours of the average university, and you can get a degree in 2 years. So they want to get you in, work you hard, teach you a lot, and then get you out. And that's what distinguishes it. And everyone lives on campus now. They're just building a new building now to facilitate that because they outgrew that philosophy. But that makes it really, really good in terms of culture because everyone gets to be so close. You're all there for a reason. Because everyone's been out for a few years, they're more mature. A lot of people, only 20% of Marcus students now actually have a farm to go back to. So, it's not what people might perceive from the outside. It's not it's not an education institution for the rich. People take it very seriously because, 80% of them have to make it work because they have to make a career for themselves. So, yeah, that campus lifestyle, continuous learning, building a culture, people from all walks of life, all parts of Australia, just make it exceptional. And the teaching style itself, you've got amazing lecturers. Deanne Whelan needs to be given an Order of Australia for just teaching accounting to dumbasses like myself and making it so interesting and have so much patience and being so smart how they structure those where they can actually basically teach you, a year's worth of an accounting degree in a module and really set you up. And then they run case studies, as you mentioned. So you have to integrate everything you learn into one business case study. And so you're using all different parts of your brain and all different parts of everything you've learnt. I compare that to, say, Macquarie University where I went, and it's just typical big university. No one gives a hoot. The lecturers are career lecturers, narrow-minded, tunnel vision, don't think outside of anything they teach. Nothing's integrated. It was quite shocking to go from a Marcus environment to that. I went there and did my MBA when I was 30 to have a bit of a sabbatical. And yeah, I think that case study model is why Harvard and Oxford and those brilliant institutions are so good, and they get just external people in lecturing all the time, motivational people, and just the passion there is wonderful institution. Yeah, it's getting harder and harder to get into, which is great as well. Just constantly lifts the bar.
Tim, I understand you're actively involved in the Marcus Oldham Foundation.
Yeah.
how many graduates roughly would there be to Marcus? How many would be in the alumni? And how would you describe the impact that Marcus Oldham Ag College has had on Australian agriculture?
Huge, just huge. I can get the alumni numbers. I don't have them in front of me, but thousands, and constantly running into people, and it just, for some reason, it just creates a group of people that just want to try and optimize their potential in whatever they're doing, and it doesn't have to be changing the world, but it can change people's worlds along the way. So the impact is immense, and just teaching, I guess, just financial acumen, business acumen. It's like an MBA for bushies, condensed version. You're just teaching, you've got accounting, you've got law, you've got HR, you've got marketing, you've got strategy, you've got agronomy and animal husbandry on as well. And again, it's sort of split into two courses. One is more on the business, a bit less on the, on the agronomy and animal husbandry side, and then there's farm management, which is more on the sort of management side, if you like. So, very similar, but condensed on the business side and more on the practical farm management. Not practical, but just, as I said, agronomy and everything you need to be a farm manager, not a business manager, but certainly you're equipped to go and run any business if you've done that agribusiness course.
You mentioned that you weren't a natural intellect, and that style of learning really worked for you.
Yeah.
Just question for you: have you always been a visionary and a big picture thinker, and where do you think that came from?
It's a really good question. My mother was very smart. I think she was a state maths champion, and Dad had a very small, like not much education, but just the world's most positive man, instilled you with, I guess, confidence and self-belief. And I think just being very fortunate, having a lot of mentors over the years, and then I think at an early age as well, even having a lot of mentors you've never met, that you can read about and study, and probably having a belief, especially after my sort of mid-20s post-Marcus, that it's just, we have an obligation just to continually learn, just trying to continually add value to yourself. And, I think it's really important to understand that where we all are today, there's so much to learn, never stops. And I'm a huge student of Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger, his partner. I've been to many of their annual general meetings, just listening to their just common sense and wisdom. And, it's fascinating them even talking about how they're still learning, and how Warren's a learning machine, and they'll go talk about mistakes they've recently made. And these are some of the richest people in the world that have, well, Charlie's dead now, but very, very refreshing, and that commonsensical approach. Just learnt so much from them over the years by just reading everything I could. And I think I've cursed or blessed with a very active mind, and I think nowadays that'd have a label to it, be ADHD or something like that. I think, learning over the years to try and control your mind, because it's, your mind can take control of you if you can take control of it. And, and an active mind can be very hard to stop sometimes. It can be painful to stop. So I've had to learn sometimes the hard way through trial and terror, and, how to control myself, just self-awareness. And there's never been any problem with motivation. It's actually the opposite. I remember getting taught how to break horses in by a wonderful old man called Don Tanner, he's one of the only Australian to win the World Cutting Championships, but he was an Australian camp draft champion as well. We used to train these horses, and you weren't allowed to put a bridle on for the first ride, because he said you can always teach them to stop later on, but it's very hard to teach a horse to go. And I think it's the same with people. So, yeah, I've been fortunate to have, I suppose, the work ethic. And to be brutally honest, probably, some insecurities and underlying anxieties that sort of, fear of failure and driving to try and be successful. And then the secret is trying to divest your ego from that. So your drivers are healthy and not unhealthy. Try to be the best version of yourself, not at the end, but during the journey.
Thanks for your openness, Tim. On reflection, that I'm going to call it an intense work ethic.
Yeah.
It seems to me like that might have come from your father, perhaps, but what has driven you, perhaps early in your career and before you really did go on a deeper sort of review of this, what was driving you back in the day?
I think some like feeling of just not being enough and insecurities. And I remember, going to church here, and I remember, one of my mates, so Sam White, of the Ray White dynasty. I remember his mum dropping him off in a pink Porsche, and I'd never even seen a car like that, and just couldn't fathom this life. And then have exposure and just felt totally inadequate. Everything from the way I dressed to like an old bushy, the arse out of my strides. So just also struggling at school. There's a lot of really bright kids, and always probably felt that I wasn't good enough, I suppose. So, and then I think in a lot of ways, my brother and I, Rob, have been, on a business sense, a bit of a team, just constantly sort of challenging each other and bouncing ideas off each other, and certainly having, I suppose, lucky to have a sister who acts like a mother figure, and a brother who happens to be probably one of the smartest people I've met, and challenging each other. And just, I remember sitting down, during the bull crash, and we shot tens of thousands of sheep. It was depressing, and I genuinely would have shot myself if I hadn't got out of there. And just saying, right, we need to go and make our mark on the world, and how do we do it? And I guess back then it was naivety and whatever, and you just got to be lucky. The timing and luck. I've been very, very fortunate. Things could have gone the opposite way heaps of times. So no smarter than anyone else. Just very, very lucky, I think.
I think we make our own luck, Tim. While we're touching on Marcus Oldham, you've recently pioneered and established a really important project in collaboration with Marcus Oldham called Marcus Minds. Would you mind speaking to that? I think at Farm Owners Academy, we're really proud of the mindset and the personal development element of what we're bringing to the industry. And I'm loving the degree to which the industry is embracing that construct and the importance of working intently and deeply on our own selves. Would you mind speaking to what was behind Marcus Minds, what it's about and how it helps the Marcus Oldham alumni and the broader farming community?
Yeah, sure. I think it probably stems back from just feeling very, very fortunate and lucky to have been in the position that I've managed to be in, and to be able to go through the journey and do okay at a younger age, and then have sort of a sabbatical and I probably the lowest I've ever been mentally has been when Rob and I sold the vineyard, which was our first real crack at having a crack at things around around 2000, 1999, and I went to Sydney, did my MBA. I had a pocket full of money, and I was doing my MBA and a single guy, and I just had no meaning to my life, and it was quite painful to stop. I didn't have, my identity, and sort of, didn't really know what that was as well. So I had a little journey of just trying to find myself, and thought I needed to sort out some of my issues before I got married and passed them on to my kids. So I've been constantly just striving to, just for me, live the best life, be the happiest I can be, trying to optimize. I think we have an obligation to try and optimize whatever potential we have, and not, not for world dominance, but just doesn't matter what it is. So I often have very philosophical conversations with Marcus, alumni and staff and whatnot. And I think having a chat to the executive team there about this, they had some high profile suicides at the college. They were trying to sort of bring in sort of more self-awareness into the college. Of course, you've got, even at a young age there, you've got at that age, we're all indestructible, right? And you think nothing can ever go wrong. And so, they tried to teach some of this. I think they called it mental health and resilience or something like that, and wondered why it had a bit of a stigma and no one turned up. So they sort of, started talking about how do we just get people to want to turn up, to learn more about themselves. And then I suppose I was lucky. I've got some friends in sort of the high performance world just by default, and a lot of high achieving friends, and we have very philosophical conversations, and all those relationships, I suppose, water finds its own level. So you find yourself around like-minded people, and most people that I like hanging around with don't have a lot of ego, so they're very happy to talk about the trials and tribulations and all sorts of things. And it just became pretty obvious that that we could really help develop something and more along a high performance sort of course. So one of the people that sort of, really helped was Luke Bennett, who's an Aussie ex-Royal Flying Doctor, born in Mount Isa, loved motor racing, so rocked up at the Formula One in Melbourne and volunteered to do something, I don't know what, but ended up getting a job and becoming the team doctor for Formula One, being on the road, and then joined a high performance group in Europe called the Hinsa High Performance Centre, which does high performance for a lot of the Formula One drivers and a lot of royal families and high net worths in Europe. Very, very, very expensive. And so he spends a little bit of time on the Sunshine Coast where I'm based. And so just chewing the fat around that and what happens in those elite high performance outfits and just realising that, hey, all that's just really, really basic. There's no secret sauce. There's no magic. It's just, it's about just productivity and positivity and just self-awareness, self-motivation and better habits, healthier habits, better decision-making and time management and just little tweaks. If you could just avoid sort of a couple of big mistakes. And even if you listen to Warren Buffett talk, he says if he had missed half a dozen of his best ideas, his track record would not be what it is. He wouldn't be one of the richest men in the world. Likewise with mistakes, if you can somehow avoid it by, just learning off people, and we're so connected. Likewise with your habits, if you develop healthy habits, and whether that's, your sleep, your diet, your exercise and all of the above, if you took out, a couple of things, 3 things a week or a day and added in a couple of other things, just what that might mean for you and your health and your happiness and time management. We've all got the same amount of time. Elon Musk got the same time as we have and, started out with the same resources as we all have as well, because the guy started with nothing. And so when you optimize your time, and a lot of us tend to waste a hell of a lot of time. So bringing all that into just a really simple format, which is basically all high performance coaching is. And when you delve into what, these elite athletes are doing, these highest paid sportsmen in the world, the royal families, your Fortune 500 owners, CEOs, it's all very, very simple and it's all free. It's free. There is no, hey, they've got money and they can afford to buy this coach who does this thing. And then it's holding yourself accountable for making those little changes and whatnot. So Luke now works with a guy called Peter Attia, who's probably the world's preeminent longevity expert out of Austin, Texas. Hundreds of thousands, millions of followers on his podcasts and books and whatnot. But he charges about $150,000 a year for a service for high net worths, just to do basically what we've provided for free to Marcus and yourselves and whoever wants. It's a free website. And we haven't ripped that off at all. It's just taking ideas of what worked. And then, Chris Hink is running that project now. So Chris is a fascinating guy. He's a Deakin University professor now, but he's been a high performance coach. He's a high performance coach for the Geelong Cats, Adelaide Football Club, Australian men's basketball team, and worked at the Institute of Sport and whatnot. So sports science is his thing. And so he's really helped develop, fine tune this program, and he'll run programs for that as well, workshops and whatnot in the future. So really lucky for all that to come together. And we just call it Marcus Minds. So I guess Marcus has been educating the best people for the best skills in agriculture, trying to get to that top 10, 20%. And this is about just a more holistic approach of trying to aim to get in a, higher echelon of all facets of your life. So it's not all things to all people, but it's it's just a free resource, a website that people can log in and have a look. And, we've tried to filter through all the hype and just distill it into nuggets of wisdom that have worked for people that we know or ourselves or whatever. And it is what it is. So it'll either go nowhere or someone will pick it up and read it. But the students at Marcus are absolutely loving it and requested more and more of it into the curriculum, which they're doing, which is great. And, I just hope it can help people to optimize their potential, or if people are struggling, helps them to pull them back on track. And, maybe it saves a life or changes a life. That's all it needs. One to be enough.
Tim, congratulations. I think it's just a wonderful project that you've pioneered with Marcus Oldham in support of wellbeing and high performance in agriculture. I often talk about the fact that for me, farming is one of the toughest assignments and most complex businesses on the planet. And we need to be on our A game, don't we, to actually do it well and to make clear and concise and really strong decisions, given the headwinds. And, given the complexity. Congratulations. I think it's wonderful that it is free and available to the whole community, not just to Marcus Oldham or its alumni. So, yeah, thank you for pioneering that and enrolling some of those superstars you mentioned. And, yeah, it's just a great resource now to let our community know about. Where can people find Marcus Minds?
Yeah, it's got its own website. It's called Marcus Minds. So if you Google Marcus Minds, you'll find it. Right. And I think Marcus in the process now of putting a link from their website, but the easiest way is, just to Google it. Yeah, I think just one more thing I'd add is I'm based in Noosa, which I'm very lucky to be. I travel a lot, obviously. Laguna's offices are in Brisbane. I'm down there a fair bit and just on the road looking for operators and deals or overseas raising capital. But Noosa's not a random postcode. It's full of amazing people that are here for a reason. And, so I've learned a lot from a lot of people sort of, that have been here. And, Mark Webber's a neighbour and a fascinating bloke who introduced me to Luke Bennett, actually. Yeah, you've got your Pat Rafters of the world, and Thomas Muster was the world number one tennis player as well, who lived in the street for a while. All these people and they've all got different styles, and they've all got different things that they've done, and they've all got, things that they thought were their edge. And when it comes down to it, it was really about the simple things, just that positivity and the self-awareness, self-motivation, and just discipline in decision-making and habits and time management. It's really, that's the only difference really between, they'll all tell you that there was a heap of people and kids that had a lot better skills than they did, but it's not always the most gifted that make it. It's all this other stuff. So, Marcus, and I know yourselves have realised just how important this is, and, I think people are ready for it now, and I always encourage people to have a look, and if you don't like it, just pass it on to someone more intelligent.
I agree. I think there has been a shift in consciousness almost where we're so open to this, and I'm delighted by the degree to which the farming community is just embracing this part of the learning journey, the emotional intelligence piece, at least as much as the intellectual intelligence piece. Tim, you mentioned two things that I just wanted to pick up on. One is the importance of having mentors.
Yeah. And
then the other one just then is, landing yourself in an environment where you can be inspired by those around you. How do you do that out of interest? I know you've chosen to live in Noosa and you're surrounded by some pretty impressive Australians and entrepreneurs and others. But when it comes to finding mentors, do you formalise that? Do you ask people to mentor you, or do you just let it be a bit of a natural thing? And you also mentioned, having the likes of Warren Buffett and others as mentors through reading and learning. How do you do that, and how disciplined are you to seek out, the wisdom of others that you don't necessarily get to rub shoulders with?
Yeah, I don't think I've ever had a formal mentor. I don't think I've ever asked someone to be a mentor. It sort of just evolves. And if you listen to Charlie Munger, he's, Benjamin Graham was his idol. Obviously never met the guy because he was dead long before Charlie was born. But so I think it's never been easier with podcasts and audio books. And, from a business standpoint, there's a awesome podcast, which is actually all the Berkshire Hathaway AGMs, just the Q&A section of them. There's hundreds of hours of that when you're driving or on the tractor or whatever, just that I still listen to and just still pull nuggets out of it, just nuggets of wisdom. And so there's that. I probably don't get as much time to read as what I used to now because I'm reading a lot for work. So I think it's also filtering. And I think it starts with your friends. I heard a great quote that, bad friends stop you from having good friends. And I think that's very much the case. So even that around, habits and decisions, just making a decision at a young age to have, to work for people you aspire to be like, and to have friends that you're proud of and that you want to be like as well. And, at some stage you get comfortable in your own skin. And it's amazing how much time people will give you if you just ask them, or and if I think it's important that you're just inquisitive, and I think it's the way you carry yourself, and you get a lot more than you can ever give out as well. So, I think when I find something that I find really interesting, is just sharing it with as many people as I can, and those people, and it sort of, you just get a lot more resources, keep compounding as you you build these networks and whatnot. But clearly when you start something new, you've never done it before, you don't know. I mean, the traditional goal setting mentality of writing down the steps and the way you're going to achieve them, well, pretty hard if you don't know what the steps are. So it is about setting your intention and just doing whatever it takes and kicking down whatever doors and going and seeing whatever people is making it work. So I'm a big believer in just creating your own momentum, and it's just, that creates just synchronistic meetings with the right people at the right time. And yeah, positivity is a very powerful thing. And I have an issue with some of the social public policies we're developing now to build a bit of a victim mindset. I don't think that's in the best interests of anyone. But yeah, so interesting.
Great comments, Tim. Thank you. You mentioned fortune and luck, and then you've also touched on, mistakes and how even the likes of Warren Buffett, talk about them and learn from them so they can pursue greater levels of achievement. I'd like to get to the Laguna Bay story, but before we do, would you mind just sharing, you've had such an interesting and unique career and it's not conventional. Would you mind just speaking to some of the career choices or the projects that you've worked on and led that you're most proud of leading up to Laguna Bay, and what are a couple of the mistakes that you might have made on that journey that have given you some key life lessons?
Where do I start? So I guess I started out, I had an aerial mustering business in Western Queensland when I was young, and that was really good money. So I could earn a lot more than what I could. There was never a wage at home, even though we were based at home and doing the work. So it was sort of, you'd leave at daylight and I could go and do a few hours flying and earn good money and then come back and work at home. So and then I bought a block in Barcaldine and subdivided that and bought a house off a farm and shipped it into town. And then by the time I went to Marcus at 24, I had a rental that the rent would pay the fees to Marcus. And I think they were fortunate decisions and just looking at other people about, And then I invested in a little retail wool business, a very small amount, and that didn't work out. It taught me a lot of lessons in life. And, obviously learned a lot from that wool crash, just studying. I knew I needed to study economics at some stage and just try and work out how supply and demand works and have my own views around how the world worked and particularly around macro issues and whatnot. I think I love that saying, if everyone's thinking the same thing, then no one's thinking. So I've always tried to be, and Dad taught me to be very contrarian. I suppose he would be, in October when everyone's in Western Queensland's jumping off cliffs because it's never going to rain again, he'd be out buying cheap cattle from up north and, and then he'd sell them in April when everyone thought it was never going to stop raining again. And just that mentality, I think I started trading wool futures I'm actually hedging in a wool clip, but then of course you had this big overhang of wool, so you knew that wool couldn't rally forever because there was an infinite amount of supply coming in, and you sort of knew that it wasn't a floor price, but there was a price a long way below cost of production where you knew that the wool board would pull the supply from that. And so I started speculating on wool and made really good money, and then I thought I could do that in other markets, and so I went to Chicago and spent 6 months actually down the Chicago exchange on the floor and just trying to learn off great traders, option traders and commodity traders and currency traders. And I had no chance of having any idea of what I was doing or B, having an edge. I obviously had an edge in wool. It was very, very simple. I didn't even have a screen of wool prices. It wasn't about that. I think that's when I really started studying that Warren Buffett, the value model. And you learn from your mistakes, and I think failure is a very good opportunity to start again a bit more intelligently. And I think the lesson on failure, is to learn when never to give up, so you can achieve something, but then learn when to cut. And so I think that gets around to trying to work out where you might have an edge and where you don't. We Laguna Bay. There's lots of. It's been going for 14 years, and there was lots of trials and tribulations there we can talk about. But LGI is another business that I backed as a sort of, very early days of startup, probably 11 years ago or something, 12, actually, it was longer than that, 2011, whenever that was. And it's a business that extracts, we go and contract the rights to the methane landfill out of rubbish dumps for sort of 10 or 20 years. And then we put in extraction systems and generate carbon credits as we flare the methane down and drop that carbon footprint of the methane. And where we've got enough gas, and we can get interconnection into the grid, we'll generate power. So we drop in just containerised generators and huge amounts of gas on a lot of these sites 24/7. And so lots of lessons learned there. But the way I got into that business, which has been an enormous success, and we listed that on the Australian Stock Exchange last year, is I've got into that business through a mistake. I got a phone call from a friend from school who was an engineer, and at that stage I was studying. I thought, it was just post the GFC, and I thought, I need to put on a couple of bets for the rest of my life. And I thought sort of renewables was one, and agriculture, obviously monetising a skill set, but not doing it all with my own balance sheet, because I didn't want to buy a farm and just day in, day out do the same thing. My attention deficit disorder wouldn't let me do that. So I ran into these guys who were inventing this engine that would run on dirty gas. And because at that stage, that coal seam gas was big in Queensland and still is. But, there was a lot of that getting flared off. And I thought, okay, what can you do with this free resource? And I remember someone telling me that, at once, very wise, saying you can make a lot of money solving other people's problems. And, I did some trials on that. I needed to find some landfill gas. I gave these guys a budget and a time, and I knew nothing about technology, of course. I'm not an engineer. But the best thing I did was I had to find some landfill gas to do some trials on, and that got me introduced to Adam Bloomer, who's my business partner at LGI, and the rest is history there. But I soon realised that the engine wasn't going to work, and so when they cut through the time and the budget, I cut it. Now, if I had been a stoic entrepreneur that never give up, I probably would have went broke, just feeding a machine that I would never know whether it was going to have an edge or not. Didn't have an edge in that area, but I knew a good business model when I saw it, good person when I saw it, and being able to monetize that free resource and solve odour control issues for councils and drop their carbon liability, and then generate this renewable peaking power so we can flex that. So we've got the most volatile commodity in the world, the Australian electricity market at the moment, ranging from negative, $500 a meg to 17,500, sometimes a couple times a day. So yeah, we can sit there and arbitrage those opportunities. So I think the lesson there is just knowing when to cut and knowing when not. And it's a judgment call, but I think part of that is do you or your partners or whatever have an edge in what you're doing. And then some of the lessons at Laguna, the early days, was just, until you build a brand and an asset management platform where you can facilitate external capital, and we have a lot of it, and it's committed, so we have absolute discretion over what we do. We raise capital from institutional investors from around the world, and it's at our discretion with what we do with that capital. So you need gold-plated governance and compliance, and committees and independence, and that takes a lot to build a platform. So I think initially thought, run around and find great deals and money would come in, and of course people are very happy to rip you off. So yeah, got touched up a little bit in the early days, and then just learnt, how to structure things properly and have control of your own destiny. So, very, very lucky now. Brilliant investors, brilliant team, and we've got lots of flexibility to do whatever we want in agriculture. We can go anywhere in the supply chain and any operating structure. We can do debt. We've privatised a couple of listed companies. We do joint ventures. We love doing joint ventures with good farmers and providing expansion or succession capital and scaling them up, and in whatever sector. We're sector agnostic. Yeah, so that's Laguna. And I guess, again, solving a problem. I think one of the biggest problems facing agriculture is twofold. There's a lot of subscale farms in the world, and I think as subsidies run off, and they've run off in Australia, thank God, but the world can't afford to have these subscale farms, and then your average farmer probably will die or retire in the next 10 years. So, there's equity needed to come in and fund this succession and reaggregation of subscale farms. We know that a third of primary producers have less than $100,000 of revenue, and then of that, the majority is off farms. So a third of farms are really not profitable. So I don't think it's in anyone's best interest to continue that forever, unless it's a lifestyle thing and you can fund it with another career. And not everyone was born, one birth lotto and was born into a farming family. We have a balance sheet and you can actually scale yourself up. Rob and I were very, very lucky and my sister, that we had parents who worked really hard, and it wasn't huge, but it was a small farm, but it gave us a leg up in terms of having something to leverage, use collateral for our first loan, and just puts you way ahead of the pack. So I think early succession, I know you guys are really big on this and facilitate a lot of that, which is a credit to you. Early succession is really key. You don't want to hold that generation back and back and back, and then they lose their passion, their magic. And I think there's a lot of mental health issues come out of that. Just no succession. What am I going to do? Am I going to end up at the farm? And at some stage, the tipping point where it's too late. You don't have the skills to reinvent yourself into another career. Plenty of unskilled labour around, but it's I think there's a huge problem there that certainly Laguna are putting a shoulder to the wheel and providing equity capital into helping to solve and doing it profitably for our investors. Yeah, one of our investors is Development Bank of Japan, which is public information, and they've actually invested in one manager in every continent to learn how to do exactly what we're doing, because they've got, I think their average farmers in the mid-70s, and that's the average. And the average farm is absolutely tiny and huge subsidies. And so that's really problematic, especially now with food prices going up and they're having inflation over there for the first time ever. So trying to work out how to re-aggregate all these subscale farms, how to facilitate succession and get people off this subsidy drip, which I think is in everyone's best interest globally. Yeah, big problems. But again, I think you can make money solving problems.
I really appreciate you touching base and sharing that detail about Laguna Bay, Tim. Would you mind just giving us a bit more insight into the business model that underpins it? You mentioned part of what you do is back established family farmers that want to go after growth. I'd love to hear more about that. And no doubt you make direct investments that you manage, and I'm sure you do some probably more real estate plays. But would you mind just speaking to the different types of involvement you have in the industry?
Yeah, sure. So we do everything from your standard buy and lease back transactions, which are pretty vanilla if people want that. We love to back people, and so probably a good example is our joint venture model, where we go, well, I think farmers have often got head assets and heart assets, and the heart asset is obviously where the family grew up, family home, and that's never for sale, never's a long time, but you don't want a partner in that. So I guess we designed a model where we thought we could provide external equity capital and it wouldn't destroy anyone's life if it didn't work out for whatever reason. Yeah, so we will go in and partner with people. They'll keep whatever assets they want to keep. They'll often be a target asset that we want to acquire. They can put money in if they can afford it, if they want to. And over that's an operating company that's just owned pro rata by whatever it does. It's the cow's milk or the acres farmed or whatever. And so they've got control of their own destiny. They'll be managing director of a much bigger enterprise to get all the scale benefits. We can really help them out with a lot of the governance compliance issues that are coming in thick and hard and fast now. We can help, procure stuff cheaper and with offtake and whatnot. And yeah, they just own a smaller bit of a bigger pie. And if they want to exit or we want to exit for whatever reason, then the operating company, all it does is just own all the plant and equipment and the staffing contracts and whatnot, livestock, but not the land. So it's pretty easy to value that and separate that, and there's no transaction costs and whatnot. So we create really good alignment between both parties. And I hate gameable systems, and governments are just experts at designing gameable systems, and humans and capitalism particularly will game a system, and God knows how many trillions of dollars are being gamed out of the NDIS at the moment, which is clearly going to blow up at some stage. It's just not affordable. And even Medicare, I think, was out by a factor of 10,000 on the original estimates, just because, it's gameable. So likewise on this, we don't want them to ever feel like we can game them or vice versa. So it just creates really, really strong alignment. And again, it's all about the person. But are they up to, working with someone like us? And that it's worked. It's worked really well. We can do debt as well, which which means we can buy debt of banks or whoever else and restructure that if there's a workout. But we really need to know that operator is either in or aiming to get to with a path to that sort of top 20%, because otherwise returns just not going to be there.
Who's an ideal candidate for a joint venture with you, Tim?
I mean, we need scale. So our minimum investment's $35 million. So otherwise it's just, we can't scale ourselves up, if you like. So, yeah, I mean, the ideal candidate is someone who wants to grow, who has a target asset, or the succession, and they want a solution for that, equity capital for that. But, we have pretty high hurdles. We need to be driving strong cash returns out of that as well. So a lot of your traditional ag at this stage of the cycle just won't meet our hurdles. So obviously we can't do it, but we love integrating things onto ag as well, and value adding where we can, and having a big stake in geographical regions if we can get there. So very, very flexible, very open.
Thanks, Tim. What's your outlook on ag for Australia?
Long term, incredibly, incredibly positive. I think short term, I don't know. I mean, it would be normal right now with cap rates, with interest rates being where they are, to start biting into asset values. I think we're already feeling that in certain areas. So that is what it is. I think there's two areas I think that in Australian ag that really, really excite me for the rest of our lifetimes. And I don't know who's going to live longer out of the two of us, but one of those is just high integrity, traceable food systems. So, the adulteration in food, the $1 trillion white crime industry of just bullshitting the customer basically by adulterating product, whether it's just, olive oil, milk, honey, spices, teas, like you name it, it just goes on and on and on, depending, and it gets worse in different jurisdictions. But even here, we know that 2/3 of the extra virgin olive oil that people think they're buying is not extra virgin olive oil; it's adulterated. So the really exciting part is, I think that that the technology it's actually here to be able to test products and pick up markers in the food itself and know exactly where it came from, know whether it's had exposure to chemicals, just know geographically where it came from as well. Pick up hereditary traits and whatnot. So it's fascinating. And I think that technology in our life will be on a mobile phone, so the consumer will just know. And then I think before then, or during that stage, will be a tipping point where all of a sudden, if you've got the real product, just the premiumisation of that, I think, will go through the roof as you just wake up and realise it's sort of happening in a little bit to a certain extent. It's more so probably climate related at the moment, with droughts in Europe, but just with olive oil prices. But I think, the world could well wake up one day and there's half of the amount of product of a particular commodity than what they thought there was, because it was being adulterated by something else. And that's, I think, at some stage just creates instant millionaires out of a lot of people in Australia, because we have got, a good rule of law, got great systems of traceability and integrity. And if you get caught out, you go to jail. And I know a bloke who's gone to jail for adulterating grain. So you can't argue that that's not a good system and will stand us well in the future. And I do think there's a lot of opportunity. It's scary for a lot of farmers, but I think the transition to a lower carbon world offers a lot more opportunity than threat to Australian agriculture. And I'll sort of probably go back. I've learned a lot from the LGI journey. We did some of the very first carbon projects in Australia. And so we've learned a lot over the last decade of doing that. Very lucky I sit on Ross Garneau's Superpower Institute. Ross is a fascinating mind, one of the smartest people I've met. And he, I think he chaired the Australian Wool Board at one stage, but Ross was chief economic advisor for the sort of the Hawke and Keating government, and really drove a lot of their initiatives, which had changed the world for Australia particularly, and was a very, very early proponent of this just Asian demand. And he was trade ambassador to China for a period of time and just driving that trade. And basically, I think he was the first person to identify that China could not grow to what they are now without high quality iron ore. And that was the first seeds to the iron ore industry. So, you've got to listen to these sort of people. They're not always right, but I think to decarbonise, we need to grow more biomass to substitute lots of products. And the obvious ones today are, sustainable aviation fuel. And, we're doing trials on some of our farms now and genetics to do that, and a joint venture with BP. But as we start replacing a lot of things, then biomass becomes a really important ingredient and sequestering along the way. So I don't know where that ends up, but I think it's got the potential to be huge. And, I think that most of the manufacturing capacity in the world will be rebuilt in our lifetime to a lower carbon system. And so I do think that it's we should be ashamed of our energy policy here. Both sides of politics have just stuffed this up massively. And I've had a great seat at the table to watch this out unfold and obviously done okay out of it. But, we should have the cheapest energy in the world here by far. And we should be able to add a lot of value to products here using that cheap energy. And I think that it's just a shame we sort of had a short election cycle and lack a bit of vision in that regard, and just ideologies. One of the greatest lessons I've learned from Charlie Munger is just how destructive ideologies are for our mind, whether it's religious or political or anything. And as he said, if you suffer from ideology, you've got to turn half your brain off because you just can't think about the other side of the argument. And unfortunately, we've done a lot of that during this energy transition. And I don't see a solution, an easy solution out of that. I think, and it's a huge wasted opportunity, but it is what it is. I sit back and go, how do we make the most amount of money out of it? Again, try and solve the problem.
Great comments, Tim. Thank you. What would your comment or advice be to a younger you or that school leaver getting started in their first or second year in the workforce and then considering an education like Marcus Oldham or other? What would your advice be?
I think it would be, and I wish I had done it a lot earlier, is just better self-awareness, all the things we've spoken about, all the things that are on that Marcus Minds website, just at least have an understanding of that. And then definitely it would be just to get as much experience and exposure across as many different things as you possibly can, and just try and, again, you mentioned a high level of consciousness across the world, and I believe that's very, very true, and it is rising. And I think as you get all those things we mentioned on the Marcus Minds, if you're sort of awareness of that, your conscious does rise, and you can probably tap more of your intuition and not be killed by your fears of failure and all these other emotions that play into sabotage us. So I think that self-awareness, and then having a lot of different exposure across a number of different sectors, and then using your intuition to work out which one you think you're passionate about or you might have an edge about, and then trying to work out how you put self-interest a little bit to a side. It's astounding how many people have gone and worked for nothing for people just to learn and then ended up, doing incredibly well. So a little bit of delayed gratification. It's never too late to start. Some of the most wealthiest people in the world didn't start until they were in their 50s. So just invest in your education, and not formal education, but that's reading, it's thinking, it's talking to people, it's listening to your podcast. It's just all of that. Get hungry and just understand that when you leave school, it's just a license to start learning. When you leave university, it's a license to start learning. And whatever you end up being will be a sum of all the decisions that you made and the actions that you took. So taking responsibility. And I think trying to work for people that you really admire and aspire to be like, and not just because of some financial goal, but because of they're just, the sort of people that you'd want your daughter to marry or whatever. And just, be avoiding, envy and greed, which is so hard for young people now because they get it in their face every day. Facebook makes you feel like you're an absolute loser because you're having a shit time and everyone else having the perfect time, and all these things are in your face about just rubbing it in your nose. And so I think another Charlie Mungerism was, greed and envy, the only two of the deadly sins you can't have any fun with. So don't do it to yourself. So I think avoiding that and taking a longer view of just, again, and a very wise bloke said to me when we sold a vineyard that he said, you can build a townhouse on 6-inch foundations, but you can't build a high-rise. So he encouraged me to go and do my MBA to build some foundations. So I essentially went backwards and dug back down, earned nothing for a year and a half and invested in doing an MBA. And I think not being scared just to, invest in yourself. But we're so lucky nowadays with even what you guys provide. Just there's so much stuff out there that can be done so cost effectively, so quickly. It doesn't have to be Marcus Oldham. It can be some of your guys' stuff. It can be just listening to people, whatever. But yeah, and just believing that there's a flywheel in life. And of course, it takes a lot of effort to get the momentum going on the flywheel. But just believe that it won't always be that way, and life gets easier and easier as you get the momentum on the flywheel. Definitely that's my sort of metaphor for business. I think that it always takes 10 years and it's grind, but then the business gets that momentum and very hard to stop.
Tim, it's been an impressive career, and I hope we've in some way done a little bit of it justice in our conversation. Thank you for being so open and for sharing and reflecting today. In and around all that you've achieved, what are you personally most proud of?
I think just the family. One birth. I won the lotto when it came to the person I married, and again, I think there's a lot of luck involved in that. And then, trying to just provide a sound, stable and positive family environment for our son. And, and trying to, I hope I haven't compensated for my upbringing. And I guess, I'm very proud of Laguna Bay. Frustrated that governments are just consistently getting in the way and trying to shut us down. But proud of what we've achieved there in terms of just the track record and some of the people we work with, and just making good returns for the beneficiaries of some of these pension and super funds, that hardworking people of the public service and whatnot, that it's a big responsibility to be investing their life savings into things for the future. So, offering an alternative investment that's real and still going to be there in 1,000 years, and not some hybrid derivative that are in portfolios, and inflation protection is a big one, I think, going forward. Yeah, obviously proud of LGI. Hasn't been just an amazing team of people there, and again, but more grateful than proud.
Tim, thank you with Laguna Bay and Marcus Oldham for pioneering Marcus Mines, and thanks for making it available to the whole industry. To your point, I think there's so much benefit in not making the mistakes of people who've gone before us, and I love that concept of standing on the shoulders of giants. And I think that project's helped so many people in industry pursue high performance and pursue their potential, for having the opportunity to learn from the greats and to stand on the shoulders of giants. So thank you for that, and really grateful for your time today, and thank you for sharing.
Well done, Jeremy, for you to put yourself out for these sort of podcasts. It's exactly how people learn and, and better themselves. And again, it's a flywheel. So you've certainly created one for a lot of people. So congratulations and well done.
And so there you have it, ladies and gents, an incredible interview with a very intelligent and very passionate individual doing really significant things in agriculture through Laguna Bay and other projects, but also in his contribution to Marcus Mines, helping farming families and individuals in Australian agriculture pursue high performance. So thanks, Tim, for your time. I think it just confirms for me, across everything that we spoke about, that our success genuinely does start with attaining a winning mindset and looking after and nurturing a high performance attitude. If it's good enough for elite sportsmen and women, and if it's good enough for elite performers outside of our industry, from the arts through to corporate and executive management, then I think, given the complexity of Australian agriculture, that it's good enough for us. It's great to see so many individuals in Australian agriculture open more than ever to this whole construct of high performance and resilience and mindset. But like Tim, I do believe that our success, and I think Tim's a good example of this, our success starts with really getting our mindsets right. So go and check out Marcus Mines, and please come and check out Farm Owners Academy. I'm deeply proud of the personal development and mindset training that we offer the industry, in conjunction with the business development priorities that we focus on through our programs. Tim, thank you very much again for your openness, for your insights, and for sharing your story. Bye for now. Thanks for listening to another episode of the Profitable Farmer podcast by Farm Owners Academy. If you're new to this show, be sure to follow us. If you've been a long-time listener, let your friends know about us or come continue the conversation in the Profitable Farmer Facebook group. All the best as you grow your business and create your freedom farm. Until next time, keep being incredible.